Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unlearn with Bianca. On this podcast, we explore all things around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. In these episodes, I'm here to educate you, to empower you, and to challenge you so that you can deepen the connection that you have with yourself. Hello, my friends. In today's episode, we're talking about something important for health and for happiness, and that is owning your feminine power. This one is especially important for the woman. Actually, feminine traits is important for everyone on this planet because it has been not valued for so long. But this episode in particular is especially for the woman because I'm getting some questions and some people ask if I can speak a bit more on this. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about what it means to really strike this balance, which I feel is really important for women, of having softness and also living from your power. So being deeply comfortable in your softness and being powerful at the same time. And everyone's version of that will look different, and that's the beauty of it. Thinking about this episode in a way that feels natural to who you are. I also just remembered, yes, I was inspired to do this episode from some questions that had come my way. But this episode was also partly inspired by Mother's Day a few weeks ago. For the last 4 Mother's Day without my mum, I have really taken time to sit and remember the amazing lessons that she left me, that I continue to move through life with. And one of the conversations I was lucky to have with my mum was actually around her telling me the power of women owning their feminine energy and embracing it in a world where it hasn't been valued. And I remember at the time I heard this and I had this conversation, I had such resistance. The inner feminist in me didn't have a bar of it. I remember rolling my eyes thinking, oh my gosh, like so old school. We are empowered females. We can do what we want. And yes, that is true. However, my view on this has changed. And I do really think there's a lot of value in our softness just as much as our power and finding that balance, because we have sometimes forgotten that. It's easy for women to be taken seriously. Many of us have really had to dismiss our emotional, intuitive, expressive qualities and water them down in a world which really values professionalism, logic, and we fit into a realm where women are valued for being easy to manage, I guess you could say. So anyway, like I said, my perspective on this has shifted in what I now value and what I'm really practicing within myself. If you haven't already listened, I highly recommend going back to listen to episode 34. This is where I introduce this concept of feminine energy and I go into it in a lot more detail. So here I'm really sharing what feminine energy is, because every human on this planet has both masculine and feminine energy. I'm sharing more around why it's important for our health and also why in today's world it's so easy for us to fall out of that balance of masculine and feminine energy. Before we get in further, I'm going to share 2 patterns that I find a lot of females relate with. I have related to these myself. I see people around me relating to them, or clients, and I can really pinpoint certain patterns in people's bodies and where they might be on the scale, or on this spectrum, I should say. Oh, and the reason why I'm sharing these is because I want you to think about what one do you lean towards more so at the moment, and what needs some more work for you, because this will help when we get into the rest of the episode and I share some mantras and affirmations. So the first pattern is the martyr pattern. And I say pattern because remember, it's not who we are. It's just something that has happened as a result of conditioning, trauma, past, a whole lot of different things. The martyr. Now, this is when somebody may be operating from what we would call feminine energy, but it's a wounded feminine energy. So it's not an empowered feminine energy. So the martyr can look like doing everything for everyone, and in the background, quietly resenting it. So carrying the mental load, making the appointments, remembering the birthdays, packing up the bags, cleaning up the mess, holding it all together, but from a resentful place. Another sign might be the mother, but not the lover. So when we're in a martyr pattern, identity can become really wrapped up with caregiving, and that can be naturally through children, but it can also be with partners. So that would result in things like your sensuality, your softness, your sexuality. It's just not prioritized. It's just not there anymore. You might feel numb, and you might be feeling really disconnected from your life force. The martyr the pattern is overgiving and underappreciated, really needing to feel in control. So thinking, well, if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So you don't ask for help, you just get it done. But that then results in resentment and burnout. They love people around them and they care for people around them, but it's that holding everyone else, but no one's holding you. It's priding yourself on being the strong one and keeping everyone happy. So the underlying theme here, the underlying sort of thing that's running is self-abandonment, overriding your own needs, your own desires, or even intuition, because you've learned somewhere along the way that being a good woman means for a woman to put themselves behind everyone else. So that pattern is the key. Understanding that pattern is knowing what you need to work on, which is actually more assertiveness, more boundaries, more claiming your desires and your wants and your needs, more power, more inner power. The other pattern I want to talk about is when somebody has disowned or felt out of touch with their feminine energy. And I'm going to call this, for the sake of this episode, the almond feminine. So it's like you've really just lost touch with what feminine qualities actually are, and you just don't actually even relate to that part of you. It reflects in this protective, closed off state where softness and vulnerability are replaced by self-protection and dependence as a survival mechanism. So how this shows up is hyper-independence, armoring around the heart, so not letting people, friends, family, partners get too close. Prioritizing work over intimacy. So maybe you pour all of your energy into achievement and productivity and staying busy because you know that's what society praises us for, but also because it feels safe and it feels measurable. And something like relationships, they are not always predictable. They can feel messy, they can feel emotionally unpredictable. So something more predictable like work can, in that case, become your safe place. Another pattern of the almond feminine, or just not feeling connected to your feminine energy, is clamming up around intimacy. Like you might crave connection, but when you get too close, it's the body shutting down or going into freeze. What else? Using partners as projects. You might be the person, if you've got this pattern, that attracts people that you can fix, that you can help, that you can guide. But in the process, it keeps the focus off your own emotional needs. And from previous relationships that I have experienced when I've been stuck in this pattern, it throws off the polarity of the relationship, which is sort of that attraction in relationships. And underneath it all, it's really this running belief of if I stay in control, I won't get hurt. If I keep my heart protected, I won't be rejected. If I'm the strong one, I'll stay safe. But the cost of this is really disconnecting from your emotions, disconnecting from your softness, from your body, and disconnecting from your ability to receive. So if you relate more to that second pattern where you just feel so distant from feminine energy, or you feel like you're more in that protection mode, your job, your practice is to really start to be more comfortable with emotions, with vulnerability, with softening, and getting in touch with your body again. When you are in your empowered feminine energy, you are both open enough to feel and express your needs and strong enough to also honor them. And that balance is healthy femininity. That is soft power. I think so often when we think about feminine energy and when it's spoken on social media these days, it's all about like soft life and just, I don't know, like just being in my soft girl era. But it's so much more than that. It's definitely balanced with their power and range. And yeah, it's something that I think we need to speak more on, because a lot of women that I'm seeing are feeling burnt out. We're feeling disconnected. And this is the journey I've been on, because I relate to both of those patterns. And I'm really working on my own shit at the moment to find my own balance, which I think I again speak on in that earlier podcast. So for the rest of the episode, I want to share some mantras or some affirmations that really help me stay connected and balanced to both my softness and my strength. And if you like these mantras, write them down, look at them, put them somewhere where you can read them, just to really start to imprint what you are working on and working towards. Number 1, say it with me. My power doesn't come from performance. It comes from presence. I'm going to give you a moment. Say it again. This one is really important because especially as females, a lot of us through conditioning, we have been taught that if we perform well, then we will be chosen, we will be validated, we'll be loved, and we'll be seen. So without realizing, a lot of us are constantly looking for cues outside of ourselves to validate our own confidence, our own enoughness. And we do it so autopilot that often we don't even realize that we're doing it, but it means that we're shrinking. When we are tapped in and in balance and living from our feminine energy, we are the most magnetic and the most radiant when we are not chasing, we're not grasping for validation. We are simply attracting by being ourselves, just by showing up as ourselves authentically, as we are, owning all of us, owning all of our shit. That is actually when we are the most magnetic, believe it or not. And that is why I, through unlearning this pattern of like looking outside for cues of my enoughness, I have now started to ask myself in my own head, just when I'm out and about and I find myself dimming, I ask myself, am I performing right now to gain approval, or is this actually me? And it shifts that spotlight from what's going on outside of me and what people think to how am I feeling in this moment, or what do I actually need? It's something that we can feel in people when they are tapped into their power. They have let the performance drop. And it's something we can all practice. We're not scanning the room, we're not playing a role, we're just present in a conversation or in who we are. So if you think about this in practical terms, I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. Think about let's say two women walking into a restaurant. So the first one is, by society standards, absolutely flawless, stunning, immaculate, outfit's amazing. But you can feel if someone walks in, the energy's sort of scanning the room thinking, do I measure up? Like, will that person like me? Am I enough? Do I look okay? I wonder what they're thinking. Are they judging me? How can I impress? Blah, 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 blah. That is performing. It's really subtle, but you can almost feel it in someone's energy field when they're questioning themselves. Regardless of how good they look on the outside, it's more of a sort of, it's a shrinking in the body, and it's a performing. And it can also come across as like extroversion, because sometimes the most powerful people are actually not the ones that need to be seen and aren't the loudest in the room as well. And I often say this, especially to my young clients, because it's like we have this perception that when we look good, when someone looks ideal, then they are confident, and it's not always the case. And I think it's so important for us to remember. Let's imagine somebody else, not dressed up, maybe casual, walking into the same space, shoulders back, walking into the space, not performing, but inhabiting, meaning feeling comfortable in their own space, comfortable in their body. You can see when someone is relaxed, when they're rooted, and they're not looking around for approval because they're giving it to themselves. Like, I'm allowed to be here. I'm enough to be here. And in that moment, that person, that woman, she will become the most magnetic person in the room simply because she is giving herself that approval. Not because she's trying to fit the mold, not because she looks the best, because she's giving herself that approval, because she's dropped the act. So the power isn't in her performance, it's in her presence. It's in how she owns herself. And I think the most powerful thing we can do as women is own ourselves, own all of our flaws included, because when we can do that, there's nothing that someone can tell you about you that you don't already know. We just need to start owning all of who we are. So other sneaky ways that we can perform just to become aware, it's things like smiling when you're uncomfortable. You smile to try and like keep the peace or to make someone feel better, even when the joke's not funny. It's nodding along when you disagree. It's tying your worth to how busy you are. And it's curating your life for validation or likes on social media. Remember that you can never control how everyone perceives you. And it's not your job to control and manage how other people perceive you. It just drains so much life force energy. And the last point I want to make on this is there's also this thing called spotlight syndrome. We think people are thinking about us way more than they actually are. Most people are pretty focused and fixated on their own issues, their own lives. I like to remind myself of that when I go into spaces I haven't been before, or I'm not feeling as confident and magnetic in that moment, remembering that people are really tuned into their own reality. And that is always just a really reassuring thing to remember. The next mantra, I own my standards over holding unspoken expectations. You are allowed to be an inconvenient woman. Inconvenient woman, again, is not something we are taught, but this is that power of the feminine energy, that power of owning your wants and desires. It may not always get likability if you're inconvenient, but one thing I can assure you will get is respect. And something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is like around our beliefs and holding on to our beliefs, and also having this ability to hear people's perspectives and shift our beliefs. So strong beliefs, a quote that resonated with me is strong beliefs but loosely held, is I think something that can be really powerful. Owning our beliefs, owning our standards, speaking them and holding ourselves to them. So there is a powerful difference between expectations and loving standards. Expectations are what we place on other people, but they're often unspoken, or they're assumptions about how other people should act. You think something like, or maybe they should just check in on me more often. But when we actually don't say that out loud, when those things don't actually happen, it leaves us feeling really disappointed and resentful. And then we start questioning, am I enough? Have I done enough? It's all this internal dialogue of an expectation we place on someone and them not meeting it, and then it reinforces a whole lot of beliefs we have. Standards are very different. Standards are what you hold for yourself. So they're not about trying to control other people or change other people. This is feminine energy. Instead, standards are knowing clearly what you will and what you won't accept in your life. So they're about choosing what feels safe and aligned for you and acting from this place of clarity and self-respect. So really having that worthiness and self-respect to know that you deserve a particular standard, but making sure you communicate it at the same time. And this is also something that I've really had to work on, especially as somebody who, number one, used to assume people could read my mind, and number two, felt like, who am I to have these standards? And yeah, it's something that I think a lot of women can relate to. So for example, Instead of expecting a partner just to guess what our needs are, might be reassurance in a particular instance, gently instead expressing needs from a place of a standard. Like, I feel most connected when we check in with each other regularly. It helps me feel safe and seen, and stating that as a standard, that is a different kind of energy, because someone that has standards like that and can communicate from that place, it's someone that trusts that when they show up authentically, those who are aligned will respond and those who aren't will reveal themselves. So there's no chasing, there's no energy wasted, there's no performing. It's that feminine power of owning your standards with softness and strength, inviting respect through your energy, and, obviously communicating it from a really loving place, and choosing relationships or friendships and situations that truly honor your truth. I think too often we get really concerned about how someone might react or respond, and therefore we just have these expectations in our own minds and are constantly getting let down, and then that builds into resentment. And that can be friendships, that can be relationships, and a lot of this I think is that remembrance of how important difficult conversations are, and just that we can't escape conflict, and uncomfortable conversations, they really do lead to more intimacy. So I'll give you guys an example. So something I noticed that looking back now that I used to do in some of my previous relationships, which was not coming from my feminine energy, is I didn't really have the confidence to really own my standards. I'd instead, again, have these expectations that were more running in my head of how someone should be or react or respond or whatever. But what I found myself doing in that case was communicating through nagging, through guilt tripping, through criticizing, with this intention of trying to get my needs met, when really I hadn't just stated my standards and put that on the line for someone. So once I identified this and I worked on changing it, and that this is some of the work we do in Self-Sourced, and did this from a place of warmness and openness, and really thinking about like my standards, what I will accept, what I won't accept in all sorts of situations in my life. I trust now that people will meet that or they won't, but it doesn't result in resentfulness or drama. When you own your standards, you stop chasing or begging or nagging for validation. It just cleans up your energy. Rather than having those expectations on people, you just observe how people show up, and then you respond with clarity based on how they're showing up. That is true self-responsibility we can work towards, and that is feminine power. Plus, it makes it easier for other people in our life to show up, because they actually know what's going on in our minds as well. And if you're relating to this point, one thing you can do is ask yourself, in what areas of your life have you been quietly disappointed? Write down a situation, and then next to it, articulate the standard that you wish you'd named. And this is really helping us move from the expectations into standards, and starting to get clear on like, where was that resentment held? What was it about? Where did I not set the standard? Okay, next mantra. My happiness is non-negotiable, even as I give love to others. Ladies, women listening, we have to treat ourselves nicely, because when we treat ourselves nicely, then people realize I must treat them well, because that's the only treatment they're going to accept. Okay, we have to become selfish. And I know, again, I've said this before, that word, sometimes it's like it creates a whole body reaction of like, oh, selfish. It's an act of self-respect and an act of love. So doing things that make you feel happy, doing things that make you feel calm, doing things that make you feel alive. I think we really need that bit of selfishness, and this is especially for the martyr pattern that I was talking about at the start. We need that selfishness to show our brains that we are willing to receive, that we value ourselves enough to say, I matter. And this one is huge because as women, again, it's the conditioning that we're taught to put everyone else's needs before our own. And of course, it depends on what season of life you're in, but that can continue on to more of an identity level if we're not really looking at our own needs and our own happiness. So we have to romance ourselves in the small moments. We have to celebrate ourselves. We have to own our joy because it sets the tone for everyone else around us. There's actually strong research showing that a mother's happiness and emotional well-being directly impact her children's development and their happiness. So if a child grows up and sees within a family that the mother's needs are prioritized and she is looking after herself, then that has a really positive effect on what the child learns as they grow up. And it's not just true for mothers, it's true for all of us in our relationships. We're sold this idea that if we compromise, then we will be happy. But actually, again, our radiance and our magnetism comes from owning what makes us happy without needing to change to fit into somebody else's mold. One thing that so many of us can relate to is changing ourselves to be loved, and especially in the romantic sense. That is something we need to stop doing. Yes, of course, taking on feedback and, working on the relationship itself, but innately changing our wants and our desires and putting our happiness on the back burner to try and mold into somebody else's life, it's only going to result in resentment in the future. So when people are happy, when they're magnetic, they are not changing. They're not changing who they innately are. They're focusing their energy on themselves, then their family, then their relationships. But there is that level of prioritization. And that is where we can be, it's where we can give from. It's where our cup is full from the most. And a quote just to pin this point in, I found it on Instagram today. A lot of exhaustion doesn't come from the constant overdoing, but betraying yourself daily in the small betrayals. That are the moments where you try and mold yourself into somebody else. It's when you stop prioritizing those little things you used to do for yourself. It's when you don't take 5 minutes to put your feet on the grass. It's when you don't you don't cook that meal that you know is going to be good for you. All of these things, all these little things that make us happy, when we stop doing them, we get more pulled away from our true essence, and that can be what drives a lot of fatigue. I've seen it time and time again. So connecting to yourself, prioritizing your happiness, really questioning, what did I believe about putting my own needs and desires first? What was I taught growing up? And that will be a good place to start. The next mantra, I listen to my body's cues. I no longer ignore its guidance. I listen to my body's cues and I no longer ignore its guidance. We are in feminine energy when we stop overriding our body's cues. Your body carries wisdom that your mind can't always explain. And that can be in the aches, in the tension, in a not sure why, but it's like a inner knowing of no. That is your body speaking. And we are not taught how to slow down enough to listen. It's something that has taken me years and years and years to even understand where I hold tension in my body. On that note, a lot of you guys listening will know that I had pelvic pain like 10 years ago now. And it's only recently that I've actually realized that I'm holding a lot of tension after going to some physio appointments in my pelvic floor, which I wasn't even aware of. So this is like a constant thing, finding like ways of we've been holding that our body's been trying to communicate that we haven't even had that sort of awareness of, because we haven't really tuned in enough to notice it. So the aches, the tensions, when our body says no, when we disregard our body's cues, when we don't go to the toilet when we need to go to the toilet, when we overeat, when we undereat, all these things, when we start tuning in and asking, what is my body trying to tell me? That is living from your feminine energy. Women's bodies especially respond to safety. I want you to keep that in mind. Women's bodies respond to safety. So when we feel safe, with certain people in a certain situation, our body will feel calm and at ease. We won't be walking around on eggshells if we feel safe. So our body also speaks in relationships. And this is, again, something I don't think that we talk about enough, because as women, we've been socialized. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, guys, but as women, we've been socialized to be chosen. And I actually think one of the most important decisions we can make in our life is being really intentional with who we're in a romantic relationship with, because that obviously has a whole lot of other impacts in your future. But when, as a woman, we pick partners that don't make us feel like, we have to obviously work on safety within, but we don't feel that general safety around to be ourselves. We don't feel supported when we have to constantly be taking control, leading, planning all the logistics. We cannot let go and be in our feminine energy. Therefore, it's harder to access that feeling of relaxation in the body day to day. We can definitely do things to go about it, but it's just from a nervous system perspective, our body, being females, our body is always giving us cues of what's best for us. I'm thinking of all the examples on the spot here, but another aha moment that I had was, I don't get really colds and flus much anymore. Before I did all this nervous system work, I was getting tonsillitis, I was getting colds, flus, like all sorts of things consistently. And what I realized over time is that, yeah, sometimes colds are inevitable, right? But if I get a sore throat, if I feel run down, the first thing I ask myself is, where have I gone weak on my boundaries? Where am I overgiving? Because that's a pattern I have to keep an eye on. And as soon as I identify that and pull back my energy, my body responds really quickly. So it's starting to uniquely see what signs, like almost like the petrol light coming on in the car, what signs your body is trying to give you. But it takes us slowing down enough to really listen. So some practical things that you can do to build this connection that will help you feel more in touch with your feminine energy. Mindful breathing and just taking a few minutes a day to just be intentional and present with the breath, allowing your belly to rise and fall and just slowing down the breath. Any kind of gentle movement like yoga, like stretching, like dance, this can really help, again, us identify areas of tension, but these sorts of things can also awaken that sensuality within, that often is not prioritized or is on the back burner in everyday life. Noticing when you're eating particular foods, how they feel in the body, or where you feel areas of tension. Like I said, I've really noticed my diaphragm and my pelvic floor recently, and I'm working through some self-massaging and just really taking moments in my day to let go. You think about all the times we've been holding in our stomachs our whole lives as women. We've been told to hold in our stomachs. We don't even think about letting go unless we do it on purpose. So it's another thing. And other ways to really build that relationship with our body are just rituals. It could be a bath once a week. It could be a self-massage. It could be just putting some extra effort into the way that you are dressing. It's just those small rituals to really be present with your body. And when we can start to do that, it's easier to connect to the cues that it's giving us. The next mantra, and actually I'm going to tag this on the back of this previous one because it actually goes hand in hand. Rest is not my reward. It is my responsibility. When we are operating from this push, masculine energy, or we're operating from like more of a wounded feminine energy where we're not prioritizing ourselves enough, rest feels unimportant. Rest feels unproductive. I like rest is not my reward, it's my responsibility, because it's actually a necessity. We have to bring in moments of rest so that we can, like I just said, connect into our body's cues, so that we can listen to our own needs, so that we can get a mental break. And that can simply be by just pausing before you eat a meal. That can Like for me this week, I just realized I haven't been doing it enough. So I just went out and put my feet on the grass for 2 minutes and come back inside. And that's probably what I'll do today. Like that's enough for today. So micro moments of rest, taking a breath in the car before you start driving. If this is where we start, then that is fine. But it's about intentionally planting little moments in the day until we get more comfortable with the fact that rest is important, because it's not something that's valued. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that actually, if we don't rest, we're heading towards burnout. And finally, the last mantra for today: I am allowed to feel all emotions, and I have the power and discernment to choose how I respond. When I was not comfortable with my feminine energy, or actually didn't even know what it was, I just felt completely disconnected. I was living from a place where I didn't want to feel or let in or couldn't even recognize like heavier emotions. I just pushed them away. I just naturally just didn't want to think about them, right? And feminine energy is not all love and light. It's actually vulnerability and range of emotions. That's why I think I've said this before, but it's important that we allow men in our lives to also get in touch with their feminine energy so that they can be present with their emotions too, because they have a different kind of conditioning that stops them from feeling like they can do that freely. So anyway, feminine energy, when we are solid and knowing no emotion is too much. I am not too sensitive. You are not too emotional, too sensitive. All emotions are allowed. The more you can remind yourself and know that you're a human having a human experience, the first emotion is allowed. It's more the way we respond to that emotion afterwards that changes. So if we're in judgment of, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that way, I shouldn't be feeling angry, I shouldn't be feeling jealousy, that is actually what gets us in trouble. That is where we lose the wisdom that lies within our emotions. So yeah, how do I even want to say this? Basically, you're allowed to feel what you feel. And when you allow yourself to feel from that place, then you can discern what you do with that. So whether you spend some time to process that through journaling, through movement, I think that's one thing that we can all work on, is processing and dealing with our own emotions before we bring how we feel into our relationships, and not spewing everything everywhere and spilling out all of our emotional stuff onto a whole lot of people. That is that discernment piece. And discernment also comes with vulnerability, because a huge part of feminine energy is learning to live from that open heart. And that is not an easy thing. Vulnerability is not an easy thing either sometimes, but we can be discerning on who we choose to share parts of ourselves with, and that trust can be built over time before we choose to be vulnerable. But just leaning into vulnerability, knowing that on the other side of vulnerability there is so much more intimacy and connection, and also knowing that when we accept all of our humanness, then we can hold it for other people as well. That is us being in our presence, which is, again, feminine energy. To sum this one up, essentially, don't judge yourself for being a human. When you can stop doing that, then you are living in your feminine energy. You're not pushing through, you're not ignoring, you're not resisting, you are just in flow. And that, from that place, that's when we have the choice. What do I want to do about this? How do I want to deal with this? What thoughts do I want to have next? It's about getting real and honest with ourselves. And again, I think when we can do that, we are naturally just more magnetic, and we're naturally going to connect with people more that are on that same wavelength. Okay, everyone, we've come to the end of today's episode. I don't even know how many mantras or affirmations I gave you, 6 or 7. Ones that help me feel soft and powerful, ones that allow me to tap into my empowered feminine energy. And I hope that you take 1 or 2 of them and just reflect on how you can start embodying and living these affirmations, mantras in your own life. I hope I gave you guys enough today to really think about a few things. As always, you're welcome to email me, connect with me on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys. I hope you all have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll see you on the next episode.